This is the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. Rob Barretts is my engineer, and Christmas time is here. Oh, yes, one of my favorites. Christmas in Hollis, as in Hollis, Queens. So New York, am I right? Listen, if you're celebrating, we wish you all the best, and thank you so much for joining us. All right, so it's almost the new year. Maybe you're thinking you want to start a new business, grow an existing business, or maybe even go into politics. Well, Sam Lawson has the book for you. It is called Reflections, and really, it's a look back on your life, right, Sam, and the successes you've had.
It's things I learned from my grandfather. It's things I learned from my father. It's things I learned from being in business. As we ran International Harvester dealerships, John Deere dealerships. Then we had a manufacturing company that sold worldwide. And then we had a marketing company and still do today. And things that we've learned from dealing with people from other countries.
What did you start with?
We started out going to Western Kentucky University in Bowling Green, and then the first 2 years out of school, my wife and I were already married, and I was the ag teacher and the football coach at Carroll County High School. Loved doing that, but unfortunately in the world we live in, a teacher can qualify for food stamps. And as other opportunities came up, we took those opportunities and ended up working for a farm credit operation, and I learned a lot about the use of credit as a tool and budgeting, and I saw many successful operations that we financed, and I saw some that weren't successful and had the opportunity to analyze why they weren't. So it was a great learning experience that I still use basically every day of my life.
So you used credit to start a business.
That's all I had was credit.
Usually people get in trouble with credit.
Well, if you use it as a tool and you don't overuse it, it's a tool that you can use to get ahead. But where people get in trouble, I think, is when they get too much credit. And one thing that I learned early on, if it doesn't work on paper, it probably is not going to work in real life.
Right. So you started all these businesses, you financed other businesses, and eventually you had a daughter who wanted to get into politics, and you helped her do that.
That's correct. We actually ran the entire campaign. There's no axiom that candidate shouldn't be the campaign manager. But in her case, with her marketing experience, that growing up in a house full of salespeople and around all the dealership, she made her own decisions. And she and I counseled a lot. We talked to a lot of other people. But at the end of the day, it was her decisions that won her the nomination statewide, and then that almost won the election, which would have made her the very first female commissioner of agriculture in the Commonwealth of Kentucky's history.
So what is she doing now?
After the unsuccessful bid, she had another little boy, so now I have 2 grandsons, and I couldn't be more happy.
Oh, that's wonderful.
The main message is to value what's really important in your life, to determine what's important. If you want to go into business for yourself, I've tried to give all kind of examples of tools that you can use to get into business, to successfully use credit, how to figure out who the right people are to have you around, how to focus on your customers, how to focus on your business, parts of the business that are critical. If you want to go into politics, we've tried to give some examples there of tools that we used and things that we did to make her successful. And then at the end of the day, you come back and friends and family are what really count.
Yeah. Yep, it's so true, because you're never going to get the love from a business or an endeavor that you're going to get from your family.
No, and also to tell the people that don't want to be entrepreneurs, but that want to work in an organization for someone else, that it's okay. It's okay, whatever you choose, as long as you and your family are happy.
Right.
And also, we talked some about how important it is for your spouse to be involved. And then I tried to give examples of people that I think have been successful. My sister started out as a single mother of 4. And today she owns a worldwide company that sells prostheses and things like that for people who've been injured, and is worth a whole lot of money and is very, very happy.
That's amazing. Well, you're all about marketing. How are you marketing your book?
We're using a lot of Facebook, Twitter, all of the tools that are available through there. and doing interviews like this with mostly radio personalities that she or I've met over the years. They were gracious enough to give us a couple minutes to talk with them.
That's a great way to go.
One example of one of the lessons, and this is one that I learned from my father. We were actually cutting tobacco. Now, anybody that's not a farmer in a tobacco state won't know what that means, but you start at one and field the other, and you go to the other, and you actually cut the tobacco stalks and put them on a stick. And we had a couple of my football friends from high school out to help, and we showed them how to do it. And then my dad and I had always raced from one end of the field to the other. So after he got them started, I said, okay, are we going to race again today? And he said, no, let's hold back. He said, you just kind of stay with me. And he started bragging on those two friends of mine, what a great job they were doing and how it was just wearing him out to try to keep up with them. And gradually we kept speeding up, and they worked themselves to death. But at the end of the day, they were happy as the larks because they'd been bragged on all day, and they couldn't wait to come back the next day. That's one of the lessons I learned.
All right, Sam, thank you so much. Steve McCall loves to golf. He loves it so much he wrote a book. It's called What's My Score? And I got to tell you, I love this description, Steve. Play along in this fun exercise. Follow Steve hole by hole and see if he breaks a rule. Get ready to tee off.
I did, because I taught junior leaguers when I was a lot younger, and I wrote the book because no one knew anything about the rules. So we did it as examples, 18 examples of what to do.
I didn't think anybody even cared about the rules.
Oh, they care. Sometimes people don't know they're breaking them. That's why I wrote that. Basically, there's 18 situations where I've done 14 of them, to be truthful.
What's the one that stands out?
When I was in a tournament, I was laying my club down, and as I brought my swing back, halfway through my swing, and the ball oscillated, moved a little bit in the rough. And I thought, well, geez, I didn't cause that because I've already started my swing. But as soon as I address my ball, whatever happens after that is my fault. So inadvertently, I lost a stroke there, and it wasn't pleasant.
Oh, you weren't happy about that.
Well, yeah, when you have to add stroke to your score when you don't think you did anything wrong, it kind of hurts.
Yeah, it's annoying. Okay. Give me another one.
The very first hole when I was, true story, I was going up after I hit my first shot, went to grab a club and noticed that my wife, because it was near my birthday, had slipped in the wedge that I had asked for. Apparently I had an extra club in my bag. You're only allowed 14, and I had 15 at that point, and I knew I was in trouble, and that's a two-stroke penalty, and that one hurt a lot. But, my wife was trying to be very nice to me, and she was. It was a great club, but you got to tell me these things. What's unique about it is you play along with a competitor in a golf tournament, and you try to figure out his score. Either he breaks a rule or he doesn't break a rule on every hole. So you have 18 holes with a story about what he did. He writes down his score, and then you have to figure out, is his score accurate, or did he maybe move that branch? So then you go and you read what his true score was, and then the reasoning behind it with the rule and the rule number, and then why that happened and how it's explained. It's kind of like a little mystery book, and it's fun.
So are you going around to golf clubs and selling your book and saying, hey, I got the answers here, or what?
I am doing that. And the timing of the book came out right at the end of basically the year for everybody. So we're ramping it up through local events, book signings, and getting on local air. And Syracuse has been very good to me, put me on a TV show out here, and it's been very well received.
Oh, are you a local celebrity?
Not to my family, but apparently people see me now. I've been on the radio shows and the TV show. By no means am I a celebrity, but a lot of people in my circle always jab me a little bit because it's kind of nice to have a book actually published.
Well, yeah, it's nice to have it published. It's even nicer when you can get people to pay attention to it, and that is the most difficult challenge for any writer, is to market that book and to get yourself on a radio or TV show or written about in the local newspaper. And I don't know whether it's easier in smaller communities or, any advice you have for people that can't seem to get over that hump?
Persistence doesn't hurt at all. I kept going into the Barnes & Noble near my home, and they actually brought in 10 copies, and lo and behold, they had a reorder. So that's a good feeling. So just keep on, hey, remember me, and this is actually a very good story, and it's been well received. And, it is unique, and just keep trying, keep on knocking. You're not going to get noticed if you don't keep being a little persistent.
All right, Steve. Good advice. Thank you. Speaking of golf courses, Darlene Davis lives right near one with her 2 little boys, and it became the setting for her book entitled The Snowball Pumpkin Adventure. Darlene.
Went pumpkin picking one day, and we came home and the pumpkin rolled away. And my young son kept asking, "What do you think happened to the pumpkin?" And, I would make up these little stories as moms do. And then it just dawned on me, I'm just going to try to write it up and go for it. I read all these little books to my kids every night, and there are no books out there based on a golf course. So I thought it was worth pursuing.
So the pumpkin rolls onto a golf course?
Yeah, well, we live on a golf course.
Oh.
So where we live like kind of up on a hill. So it rolled to the bottom of the hill where there happens to be a tee. So I thought, I would make up these little stories to my son and say, maybe he landed on the tee and a golfer mistook him for a golf ball, and they hit him by accident. So
does the pumpkin take on a life of his own and have an adventure on the golf course?
Yes, he has an adventure. So he's mistook for a golf ball. And so he goes flying, and it's, very scary. But where he lands, he meets a whole bunch of new friends and, begins this whole new life.
Does his life go on after this book?
Well, that will be the next book, I guess.
So you are going to keep this guy rolling, so to speak?
I think so.
Carter and Chase, is that the names of your children?
Yep, Carter's 10 and Chase is 6.
When you wrote it all down, did they love this book?
Oh, yeah. They were so excited. And it really hits home because they can really relate to it because they know the story and they know that actually happened. So, they think it's great.
I guess he could roll anywhere. He could roll onto a ship and head for Europe.
Yeah, the possibilities are endless, right?
They are. And this is the first time you ever wrote a book?
Yes, I'm not a writer by any means. It was just, a day that happened, and I thought it was a cute story, and I submitted to Page, and they said they wanted to do it. I thought a rhyming book would be cute. So, if you read along to the story, it goes to Row, Row, Row Your Boat, that tune. So I just basically wrote it up, and then I just submitted it as it, and then, we went through the whole process of what the pages would look like and, what sentences would be on what pages.
Illustrations.
Page Publishing did the illustrations. That was part of the deal. I cannot draw to save my life. And we've had a couple of events. I was at Barnes & Noble in Farmington, Connecticut a few weeks ago. We had an event at the local library here in Avon, Connecticut.
Are people coming out?
Yeah. We had a really good showing.
Good. Are you sending out invitations or does Barnes & Noble just put something up in the window?
They just put something on their website, and then I just put it on social media and try to promote it that way, just so to get the word out. For the library event, we had about 22 kids, which was great. We did a reading, and then we did a craft, so it was a lot of fun. And the Barnes & Noble was just people just in and out all day, so that was great too. We sold a few books. We also had an event here at Farmington Woods Golf Course. We had the Halloween party, and so I had a little table, and so we sold a bunch of books there too.
Nice. Lots of creative ideas, Darlene. Thanks. And we got so much more to share coming up right after this very, very, very short break. Stay with us.
Attention all authors. Page Publishing is looking for authors. Have you written a book and want to get it published? Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, Apple iTunes, and other outlets. They handle all aspects of the publishing process for you. Printing, cover art, publicity, copyright, and editing. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. That's 800-204-6099 for your free author submission kit.
Hey, we are back on the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. Edward Pearson grew up in the South, and he says he saw a lot of things that didn't make any sense to him, not even when he grew up. and it's what inspired him to write his book entitled The American Dream, a story of two young men brought to the U.S. as slaves, one from the colonies and one from Africa. Edward.
That's correct. It's about the history of our country, but it's about things that have been left out. It was a Black Baptist church somewhere in Virginia. They had a stained glass window that was dedicated to Susan B. Anthony. And I'm wondering what connection she had with the Black Baptist church in Virginia. It made me curious, so I started looking up, and most people, even most black people, believed that the Emancipation Proclamation freed the slaves. No, it did not. The 13th Amendment did that. 13th Amendment made slavery illegal in the United States and all of its territories. And it was Susan B. Anthony, she started the petition to put that on the ballot, the 13th Amendment. And that was what freed the slaves. That was what made slavery illegal in the United States. See, the Emancipation Proclamation, it was not legislated. It was a presidential mandate.
Right.
What Lincoln did, it was kind of a punishment for the states that withdrew and rebelled against the Union. The privilege of slave ownership was hereby withdrawn from any state that rebelled against the Union. But the border states, like Missouri and Kentucky and right along the Mason-Dixon that did not secede from the Union, were allowed to continue slavery. And prior to that, the Union Army had already freed all of the slaves in the state of Missouri. When the Emancipation Proclamation came out, they were right back into slavery. So in other words, that document freed some slaves and put some back into slavery. You see, most Americans really don't know all of our history. You see, when I grew up in the South, it was like growing up in a war zone, and your skin color was your uniform. What I found out was the first slaves in this country were actually from Europe. They were not from Africa.
Right. And
they kind of slicked that over in the history books. They used the word indentured servant.
Right.
But that's nothing but that's just a euphemism. The reason that they wanted African slaves, which actually began after the Revolutionary War, the reason that they needed African slaves was a very practical business decision. It had nothing to do with race, not directly anyway. See, because a lot of the white slaves could escape and go to other colonies where nobody knew them, and they just blended in with the rest of the population. They needed someone who not only looked different, who could be picked out of a crowd, but their kinfolks were so far away that they could not help them. And logically, Africa. Africa's way across the ocean, and an African could very easily be picked out from the rest of the European population. You see, when you grow up believing that your ancestors were slaves and they were the only slaves in this country, it gives you a different outlook. Pretty much anything you accomplish is kind of a miracle, judging by where you started. And that was what I grew up with. So the basic thing is that pretty much every ethnic group in this country at some point in our history has been singled out for special attention.
That is so
Not
true.
Not just blacks.
I don't think anybody can argue with that, Edward. Thank you so much. Thomas Maynard started writing a book about Bigfoot a couple years ago, but after 4 years in the Marines, 3 years in the Army, and more than 20 years as a veterinarian technician, he's perfected the story and published Lost Hope Canyon. Thomas.
When I wrote the book, I didn't want to write about war and all that stuff, so that's kind of why I started writing about Bigfoot. So, but it's kind of a two-part book. It starts out with a young boy named William Bradley. And you kind of find out pretty quickly that William's, he's a little smarter than your average kid, and you just know there's something special about him. And it starts out with William at his mother's funeral. She was killed by a drunk driver, and it kind of picks up with him and his father. And pretty quickly, William, he has a nightmare. And then by the end of this, he's kind of compelled to go to Lost Hope Canyon. He found it in a magazine. It was kind of the last article his mother was reading. He needed to go to Lost Hope Canyon and he would be reunited with his mother and whatever. But he talks his father into taking him there on a camping trip. And once they finally do get to Lost Hope Canyon, things don't go so good. And that's kind of where part one ends, and I'll leave it at that.
So then you have another book after that?
Well, no, it's just part one and part two of the same book. Yeah, it all kind of comes together kind of towards at the end. But it picks up after that about 15 years later with a character named Blake Still and his best friend Patrick. They're in their last semester of college. And Blake, his passion is cryptozoology. For their final thesis, they're given a list of mythical creatures that they want them to investigate, and they're randomly chosen. Him and Patrick, they're given Sasquatch. And they're supposed to kind of write it up as if they've discovered an animal and convinced the teacher, that, it's real and all that. And the book takes place in Washington State, kind of the Bigfoot capital of the world. And I lived there for a while too. So, but him and Blake and Patrick, they go to the library and they start doing research on Bigfoot sightings, and they run across the story about William and his father and what happened in Lost Hope. And once he reads that story, Blake's got to know more about William. He just feels a connection to him, and he starts having dreams about, William. And after a while, people around him, you can tell it's kind of a secret. They're covering things up, but he's convinced that William is dead. And that was kind of his agreement with Patrick, that if they found a death certificate and proved he was dead, then they would forget about him. And once they did, of course, they found that. And Blake never really forgets about it, but, him and Patrick, they graduate and they both become very successful at their careers. And Blake's already discovered a few new primates that, nobody knew about, and he's got to get to Lost Hope Canyon. And it's like things are kind of, going against him, but he still fights. It's just his destiny that he's going to be there. And eventually they do make it there. And when they do get there, they do find what they're looking for. There's a Sasquatch in there. He's called the Monarch in the book. Very, very territorial and has really kind of an unnatural hate for humans. And there's a reason why. And it's kind of destiny that Blake and this Sasquatch paths kind of cross. And that's kind of where William comes back in. But again, I don't want to ruin anything with William.
By the way, Thomas is donating 50 cents of every book sale to the Global PTSD Foundation that helps veterans deal with post-traumatic stress disorder. Finally, K.D. Esther wrote Standing in the Shadows over 25 years ago at a time when no one was talking about domestic violence. A child of abuse, she married an abusive man as a teenager, and then a friend suggested she take a self-defense class, and that's when her life changed. K.D.
So I took a self-defense class, which is my advice for anyone who reads my book. I actually, not at the time of coming up with the titles per the chapters, 12 chapters, but it's actually, according to each chapter, the steps that you take to set yourself free of a domestic violent relationship, an abusive relationship that you may be in. It gives the warning signs and whatnot. But at the time, 40 years ago, when I went through this as a young teenager and entering into my young adulthood of 2021, I took that self-defense class realizing that it empowered me. It taught me that I had worth, that I had value, that I was not, it's not my fault, which is what they use, the person they abuse. They instill fear in them so that they don't ever do anything about it, and then the abuser just is free to do whatever he or she wants to do. But realizing that it was learned behavior and whatnot, I wrote my book in hopes to help other people. And it got rejected 11 times. And so now that I'm retired, I thought, well, I'm going to write that book. And I had received on my Facebook page an ad about Page Publishing. And so I sent my manuscript in, and they published my book, and it was released on my birthday of September 16th. And each chapter, I realized, is like a 12-step program that you can take. You have to find yourself. You have to develop and change your thinking. You have to understand that it's not your fault. It's descriptive of what I went through and the domestic setting that we sometimes get ourselves into. Maybe we didn't get any kind of red flags, but then later after the relationship, like it happened to me, there were no red flags. But after I got married, the red flags started popping up. And so my book is a short read, and it's about how I escaped 40 years ago with no help. And then I found God. And God gave me the grace. God gave me the strength. God opened the doors. God gave me the fortitude, gave me the vision, gave me the opportunities to escape and walk away and do what I had to do to create and discipline myself to the point that I changed my thinking, which changed my heart, which changed my environment, because I started making better decisions.
Yeah.
When you see yourself change in that way, because I escaped, I that self-defense just seemed like it empowered me.
Right.
I wrote an article, and it's been published in our local paper, and also I've counseled many women and helped them get out of domestic violent relationships and helped them to recognize the flags and help them to realize that they have value. It's not their fault. And I've created a fan page, and I have another book interview. And my mission basically is I didn't write the book for wealth. And if you want help, this book can help you.
All right. Well, thanks for writing this book, K.D. Esther, and for the help that you provide every day to victims of domestic abuse. Alrighty, that is a wrap for this edition of the Page Publishing Book Club. Thank you so much for being here, and don't forget, you can binge listen to all of our Page Publishing Book Club shows anytime you want. How much fun would that be, Rob? Talk about a Christmas present. Just go to 710WOR.iheart.com and go crazy. Whenever you listen, wherever you are, be safe, be happy, and best wishes for this holiday season. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Talk to you next time.